will do anything in his power to destroy you. This is how deceived the devil is. He's still trying to kill you because you are an heir to the throne of God. You're a joint heir with Christ, even though Jesus showed up in hell and took his very keys from him. But he's banking on that you haven't read his word and banking that you believe in a custom. He's wanting you to believe the lies so that you will allow him to kill you and destroy you and make you think that he has all power when he has no power. All right? So in 2 Samuel chapter 8 and verse 15, David's character and his righteous actions are a story for us to read, but they are an example that somebody else will follow. And the somebody else is Jesus. So because David is a type of a king, he's a king, but he's the type of our king. And the scripture says that the characteristics of his kingdom was that there was justice and there was all of this that were done, ministered to everybody. And then just a couple verses later, let me just get through this. There's three more verses after that, and it lays out the structure of David's kingdom. So they say this is what David's kingdom was like, that there was justice and judgment to all the people. Then verses 16, 17, and 18. And if you don't know how to speak in tongues, read the names there and you're close. Those verses lay out who was the treasurer, who was the secretary, who was the chief of staff. It lays out all these things right there. It's laying it out. And so now we have what was going on in the kingdom. Then he establishes order in his kingdom. And then we pick it up then in verse 9, chapter 9, verse 1. Now David said, is there still anyone who is left of the house of Saul that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake? And there was a servant of the house of Saul whose name was Ziba. So when they had called him to David, the king said to him, are you Ziba? And he said, I am at your service. The king said to him, is there not still someone of the house of Saul to whom I may show the kindness of God? And Ziba said to the king, there is still a son of Jonathan who is lame in his feet. David the king said, where is he? And Ziba said, indeed, he is in the house of Machir, the son of Amiel, in Lodabar. Then King David sent and brought him out of the house of Machir, the son of Amiel, from Lodabar. Now when Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, had come to David, he fell on his face and prostrated himself. I mean, he fell down and he laid out flat. Then David said, Mephibosheth. And Mephibosheth answered, here is your servant. And David said to him, do not fear, for I will surely show you kindness for Jonathan your father's sake, and will restore to you all the land of Saul your grandfather, and you shall eat bread at my table continually. Then he bowed himself and said, what is your servant? This is Mephibosheth talking back to David. He said, what is your servant that you should look upon such a dead dog as I? And the king called to Ziba, Saul's servant, and said to him, I have given to your master's son all that belonged to Saul and to all his house. You therefore and your sons and your servants shall work the land for him. And you shall bring in the harvest that your master's son may have food to eat. But Mephibosheth, your master's son, shall eat bread at my table always. Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. And can we just say thank the Lord for our 3 or 4 and no more in the children department? 15 sons and 20 servants. Then Ziba said to the king, according to all that my lord the king has commanded his servant, so will your servant do. As for Mephibosheth, said the king, he shall eat at my table like one of the king's sons. And Mephibosheth had a young son whose name was Micah, and all who dwelt in the house of Ziba were servants of Mephibosheth. And so Mephibosheth dwelt in Jerusalem, for he ate continually at the king's table, and he was lame in both of his feet. This is quite an interesting story. At this point of the story, David has been king of Israel for about 15 years. And things were going well in the kingdom because he was administering judgment and justice for all, and he had established order in how the kingdom was going to run. And so now things are going on there that they're just kind of running smoothly. And I'm not sure what happened on this night that we're reading about, but something jarred the memory of David. And David is thinking, and maybe he's sitting there reflecting on his past and his friendship and his relationship with Saul's son Jonathan, and they were best friends. And maybe, I don't know exactly what was going on, but whatever was going on in David's mind, after this time of reflection, David asks, is there anyone from Saul's house? This is the guy that threw spears at David. This is the guy that tried to kill David. David was on the run from this guy, and here's David now in a place of authority. And instead of wanting to repay Saul for what Saul has done, he's asking, is there anybody out of Saul's house that I can be kind to? And the Bible then tells us that Ziba, who was a servant of the house of Saul, is summoned to the court of David. I can only imagine what was going through Ziba's mind, because Ziba was a servant of Saul, not a servant of David. His allegiance was to Saul and not to David. And if your allegiance wasn't to the king who was on the throne, more than likely you were going to be killed. And so when Ziba is summoned to the court of David, I can only imagine what's going through his mind. And before we condemn Ziba about what's going on, you've read the rest of the story. And there are times where you get summoned to my office that some of you are scared to death, and I just want to go get ice cream with you. Let's do that, would we? Can you get permission from the warden and let me go get some ice cream? But Ziba is in his mind, he's got to be wondering what is going on. And so when they get there, David asked the question. He said, is there anybody out of the house you served, out of the house of Saul, that I can show kindness to? And Ziba states, yes, there's a young man. He's the son of Jonathan. And they give this qualifier, but he is lame on his feet. So David doesn't ask, why is he lame on his feet? David just says, where is he? Let me just pause here for a moment. We often want to put a qualifier when God asks a question about being kind to us. We want to tell God what's wrong with us. And God is not interested in what's wrong with you. He can fix what's wrong with you. He just wants to know where you are. He can't fix you unless you're in his house. We're going to get there in a minute. So Ziba says, yeah, but he's lame on his feet. And David said, where is he? And he declares, he said, well, he's living down in Lodabar. And this is our first introduction to the young man by the name of Mephibosheth. He's roughly now a 20-year-old man. If David has been king for 15 years and he is 20 years old, at 5 years old, his world was rocked. He didn't even really understand or comprehend what was going on that day on the top of Mount Gilboa, where his grandpa and his dad were both killed. He had no concept of anything that was going on. So at 5 years old, his world is rocked. It's crushed, and it's forever changed. And then all of a sudden that day when his grandfather and his dad were killed, the news began to spread that, hey, Mephibosheth's grandpa and his dad, so the king and the heir to the throne of the king, have both been killed. And now that leaves, there's going to be a new king, and the nanny or the servant who was over Mephibosheth at 5 years old, she hears the news. And this is what happens to many of us, is that there are other people who know customs, and there are other people who know the rules of the house, and there are other people who have no clue what the customs and the rules of the house are. But somebody else who hears the gossip of what's going on then does something to the person who has no idea what the rules and the custom are, and it injures them. The nanny hears the news, and she knows that the custom if a new king is coming and he's not out of the same family, then the custom was the new king would kill anybody who would be a threat to his throne. So he would kill all the family members of the previous king. And Mephibosheth is the grandson of the king, and David is not a part of their family, and David is going to ascend to the throne. And so the nanny says, I have to do something. I've heard the news about Saul and Jonathan dying. I need to do something to save Mephibosheth. And so in her haste to get him up and out and get him safe, she drops Mephibosheth on the ground. He was not hurt until somebody got in a hurry. He was not hurt until somebody believed a custom over the grace of God. And so as she drops him, it must have damaged his spinal cord, because from that moment on, every time you read about Mephibosheth, he was lame on his feet. But why get in such a hurry? He's just a 5-year-old baby boy. Who would want to hurt a 5-year-old baby boy? Let me put it in spiritual terms. Who would want to hurt any of God's children? We may be 72 years old or whatever, but in the scheme of eternity, we babies. Thanks be to God. We're just babies, but who would want to do that? Well, the custom said that he was in danger. The rule of the house said he was in danger. And she didn't know the heart of David. She didn't have relationship with David. She was in Saul's house, and she knew how Saul operated and how kings before had operated. So she assumed that because all the other kings had operated that way, that the new king was going to operate that way. And oftentimes we get in a hurry and we hurt people because we are assuming things about God because we've learned them in custom and not by word. Y'all good? And so people get hurt in the church when we say things that aren't true, but because they become the custom of the church world, people remain hurt and get hurt because we talk about a custom and not his word. We look at God's house and we say, if I'm in trouble, I can't run to God's house. That's because you believe a custom that is out there that if you are hurt, you're not supposed to be in God's house. No, in this house, we have a king who wants you to come. If you're hurt, if you're lame, if you're blind, if you're deaf, if you're messed up, if you sin, you need to get to God's house. And don't let other people say things to you like, well, when I was growing up in church, they wouldn't even speak to you and they wouldn't even try to help you. My friend, there is no healing in hiding. You have got to get to God's house, and we have a different king than the way all these other people operate. So what we have is this king is different than any other king. And David, again, is a type of Jesus. And our enemy of our soul, he seeks to destroy any child of the king. He seeks to destroy, because in that enemy's mind, I want you all to grasp this just for a moment. In the enemy's mind, he thought at the cross of Calvary that he had killed the King of Glory, and then turned his attention to anybody who would be an heir to that throne. Because if you don't know this, Lucifer desires to be king. He wants to be God. And his whole plot is to kill the King of Glory and all the king's kids. So he will perpetuate a custom that will destroy the king's kids and the heirs to the throne. He will do anything in his power to destroy you. This is how deceived the devil is. He's still trying to kill you because you are an heir to the throne of God. You're a joint heir with Christ, even though Jesus showed up in hell and took his very keys from him. But he's banking on that you haven't read his word and banking that you believe in a custom. He's wanting you to believe the lies so that you will allow him to kill you and destroy you and make you think that he has all power when he has no power. Everybody mop at what I'm dropping? he is such a liar, he will tell you that Jesus did not rise from the dead. Because had Jesus rose from the dead, then he has to turn his attention away from you and get on back to Jesus. But he couldn't defeat Jesus the first time, and he knows he's not going to defeat him the second time, so that's why he's after you. We're just going to make the king pay. We're going to kill all of his kids, and we're going to destroy all of his kids. We're going to get after his kids, because the one way to a dad is to go after his kids. So the enemy desires to destroy every child of the king. He wants to destroy you because you are a rival to his kingdom. You understand that? You are a rival to his kingdom. So he has to kill you to be able to establish his kingdom. And if you are a blood-bought Jesus freak, then you are a threat to the kingdom of the darkness. If you shine light, you are a threat to the darkness. So when you say, I'm a believer, and you think, man, I'm a believer, everything is going to be wonderful. No, you're now perceived as a threat to his kingdom. And the more the church gets into revival, and the church gets into the ministry of reconciliation, and the church gets into restoration, the more of a threat we are to the kingdom of darkness. So he unleashes everything he can to get you to believe in a custom. And Southern Illinois, y'all got some customs. You have some customs. You think that because you are saved, you need to be sad. You're not saved to be sad. You're saved to have joy that is unspeakable and full of glory. You have a custom that we're beneath it. You're not beneath it. You're above only and never beneath it. But the enemy would perpetrate these customs. We're just, heritage, bloodlines, family lines. My friend, when you were born again, there was a severing of your natural bloodline and your natural family line. And you are now a joint heir with Jesus Christ. You don't have to continue to qualify that I'm lame on my feet. You are not lame on your feet. You are in a sonship with his lordship. And because you're in relationship, you are not lame on your feet. You can do all things through Christ who gives you the strength.